do that so that after I take the roll call, you're going to, did you tell them?
No, I didn't, but they're not going to recognize that.
Good evening. I would like to call the September 12th, 2017 meeting of the Hampstead School Board to order at 7 o'clock p.m.
Kathleen Aberzizi,
Here.
Jason Cipriano,
Here.
Caitlin Parnell,
Here.
James Sweeney,
Here.
Karen Yusenka,
Here.
and also seated at the board table is Assistant Superintendent Dr. Roxanne Wilson. And before we take Pledge of Allegiance, she would like to introduce the administrators in the back of the room.
I just want to take an opportunity, always at the first meeting of the new season in September, I ask all the administrators to come and directors so that at least you see we're all working together on a lot of our goals. So I just want to recognize that we have Maria Denola and Beth Stevenson from the middle school, Dillard Collins and Deanna Poulin from the elementary school, Karen Gallagher here, Doris Bucco, Dr. Clifton Dancy, as well as Nancy Lewisell from the SAU. So I just wanted to recognize that you see them all here tonight, and you'll see them at some point in time during our budget season.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming this evening. We all look forward to a good year working with all of you. And a special welcome to Deanna Poulin. Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I ask that you take a look at our minutes. We have two sets, a special meeting and a non-public on August 29th.
Make a motion to accept the two sets of minutes as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Abstain? Oh,
One abstention.
one abstention.
Thank you.
Any public comments, Melissa?
No, there were no requests for public comments.
Okay, thank you. Administrative reports, please. Mr. Collins?
I don't really have a whole lot to add to the written reports. I just want to go through and just do a very quick point, a couple of extra points in here. The safety training that we had so much discussion went awesome. It was very well received, very effective, and if you saw the media today, there was an incident in New Hampshire at a hospital which they actually had to enact some of the safety training that we were involved with. So there is a very good importance of what we did, so I would say we were far more prepared for the safety of our children. Read with the Hero went awesome yesterday. We had a nice group of people. We didn't get all the classes covered, so one of the local members of the fire department, Captain Dane, came back today to finish it off. So each class did get a visitor. You saw our new staff members. I want to make sure you, as a board members, know you're invited to come in for School Portrait Day, which means we'll get your photo. We have a nice, beautiful photo of you. You'll get a free package. You'll even keep the complimentary package. But please, if you're over at the Central School on Thursday, the 28th, just drop in as a board member and get your photo. You're always welcome. And Dr. Wilson, we would like to remind you, to remind those at the SAU as well, we always need a new photo of Dr. Metzler and Dr. Wilson for a variety of reasons. You know, Christmas cards and other things.
Make sure my hair is done.
Enrollment, I just did want to highlight, we did end up with 20 more students than we were projected on Hsdsb, and we actually have 2 more that we know that'll be here next month as part of our preschool programming. So I know there was a lot of conversation at the previous meeting about that. So that's where we are. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening.
Welcome.
Nice to see you all. Again, we don't have a lot of new happening since the last time I reported to you. We are having the first fall ball dance this coming Friday for all 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, and this is the middle school athletic club that is sponsoring that. So they will be dancing up a storm from 7 to 9 on this Friday. Our engineering club will be meeting for 7th and 8th graders on the 1st and 3rd Thursday of the month in the morning with Mrs. Griffin, and she'll also be offering a Makerspace Monday club as well. She's doing this from her own heart and just wants to get our students geared up and ready to go in the engineering world, first thing in the morning. Our parents will be coming to a meeting on Tuesday with regards to, well, it was last night, with regards to renting any instruments of anyone who would like to participate in the band. And Oliver, our 6th graders everyone in the class is going to see Oliver, a presentation at the Palace Theater. It's the students' version of this musical, and the English language arts teachers and unified arts teachers have been making integrative lessons together to support this English classic by Charles Dickens. And we stand strong at 416 for enrollment.
Okay, great. Any questions? Sounds like everything's moving along nicely at both schools.
And our playground is completed as of yesterday. That is wonderful. And we had a successful fire drill on Friday.
Good, thank you.
You want to hear from Karen? Or did you want to hear from Doris as
Karen's
well?
on her way up, that's fine.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. I have a few updates from the Special Education Department, and the first one that I'd like to share is about a special type of training for a handful of paraeducators. It's to help them become what is called a registered behavior technician, and they work under the BCBA, which is a board-certified behavior analyst. We have Jennifer Brett as our new BCBA this year on staff. So I have 6 paraeducators, some from Central, some from middle school, being trained as we speak. Actually, tonight is one of their sessions. It's a total of 40 hours of intense training. There are certain components that get covered, and in the end, they have to demonstrate competency in these different domains. And then once that's taken care of, they can sit for this online exam to be certified. So they'll be trained at the end, but then in order to be certified, there's another couple of steps. So that's pretty exciting. The paras were interested in doing this, and I've checked in with them periodically, and they said, you know, it's great information, and they find it to be valuable. So that's one piece. Another one is just an update on paraeducators within the special ed department. I have 2 paraeducator positions that were recently filled in the preschool, and that was due to people leaving and having open positions. So those 2 positions are filled. There's one position that I'm still trying to fill, which is for preschool, and that is a new position through the grant. And then I wanted to give just an update on the transition of relocating the OT space that had been out in the portables. This year, we've moved it into HCS. So students certainly have been receiving their occupational therapy services, but there are some challenges that we've come across, you know, as a result of moving into the building where we have a lack of appropriate space. So one is the acoustics, because they are using half of the stage. So during lunch and gym, the noise level is too loud, so that curtails services being provided at that time and in that location. And then the other piece that has to do with acoustics is the HVAC system. The motor runs continuously, so there's another level of noise. And then the location, it is at the other end of the building by the gym. So for the older students, they're able to head down there and have their tabletop services that deal with fine motor skills. But for the younger kids, in order to accommodate them, the OT is going closer to their classrooms using the OT room. But that is the sensory motor room that has all the equipment. So she's setting up a small table in the corner to do tabletop activities that entail fine motor for those students. But at that point, we can't use the sensory room for the equipment pieces. So it kind of has to be one or the other. So that's what we're doing right now. So another challenge with that is that if a student needs a sensory break, it can't be used at the time while tabletop activities are going on with the youngest children. So they have to look at alternatives. And let me just see what else. So that's pretty much it. And then when they do use tabletop activities in the sensory motor room, they kind of have to set up and break down a table because you don't want to have the tables there all the time. So we're working through the kinks. I've been in touch with the PTs. Actually, Dylan and I met with them again today, just to kind of work through a couple of things. We're in the process of trying to come up with some other ideas to brainstorm and maybe take care of some of these pieces or make it a little bit better. Any questions?
So it's not ideal, but you're making it work.
Right. It's not optimal, but we are making it work.
I want to make sure, assure me that no student's confidentiality or privacy is in any way being infringed upon
No,
this setup.
no,
Okay.
because they've got two separate spaces.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Doris? Sorry.
Good evening. In your packet, you have some information regarding our assessment schedule and all the assessments that we administer in the district. I do want to highlight the purposes of our district assessments. We do use the information that we gather from our DIBELS, our iReady, our spelling, and various assessments to monitor individual students' progress towards achieving the New Hampshire College and Career Ready standards. We also use the results to share with students and parents the child's educational progress. We use the information to provide feedback to the teachers on the effectiveness of their teaching practices and to guide their instruction. And we also use the results to identify students who may benefit from some additional reading and math support through our tiered intervention services. And we also use the results to identify students who may benefit from participating in our Ventures program. I outlined for you the various general education assessments that are administered in the district, giving you some information about the various subtests, the amount of time that is required to administer assessments, each assessment. I do want to point out with the iReady that our first and second graders only take the math portion of the iReady diagnostic, whereas our third through eighth graders take both the reading and the math diagnostic assessment. And of the sending districts to Pinkerton, Derry and Chester also give the iReady assessments, and Auburn and Hooksett give another assessment 3 times a year. And Pinkerton Academy also uses the iReady assessment with some individual students. We have developed our own pre-algebra and algebra placement test as one means of identifying some students for participating in our 7th grade pre-algebra and our 8th grade algebra classes. There will be a new science assessment this year that will align with the new college and career ready standards for science. This may be considered a pilot test, so we may not get results this year, and we're still waiting some further information from the Department of Education regarding this test. We do know it will be a computerized test of approximately 2 hours, and rather than 4th grade taking the test, it will be a 5th grade test and an 8th grade test.
Of course, these are the next generation science standards?
Yes, the next generation science standards,
Okay.
yes. Now, with the Smarter Balance assessment that we've been given for the past 3 years to our students, the contract with that particular testing company ended in the spring, and 2 companies, one of them being the company that developed the Smarter Balance, submitted RFPs to the Department of Ed, and we're waiting to hear from the Department of Ed as to which company has been awarded the contract. So we do anticipate that there will be a Smarter Balance or similar type assessment this spring. But you might have read or heard about a bill that was signed by the governor giving districts the ability to administer the statewide reading and math assessment once in elementary school, once in middle school, and once in high school. And for those grade levels not taking the Smarter Balance or similar type tests, districts would administer their own assessments or standardized assessments such as the iReady. But with the passage of this bill, the New Hampshire Department of Ed has to submit, or I should say, apply for a federal waiver, because with the Every Child Succeeds Act, every student in grades 3 through 8 is supposed to be tested yearly in math and in reading. So We don't know how much time it will take to hear back from the federal government as to whether this waiver was accepted, approved. So in the meantime, we will anticipate that our 3rd through 8th graders will be taking Smarter Balance or a similar type test in the spring. And then we also have a spelling inventory that we give to our 1st through 3rd graders several times a year. I also included in your packet our assessment calendar, and September is a busy month. We do testing in the month of September as our initial assessments. January is our monitoring of progress testing month, and then May, June are our other busy months for testing, with our end of the year testing to monitor students' overall progress for the year. And because of that concern raised in the district about the amount of testing that we have, teachers were given the option of not administering the January iReady assessment. Middle school, however, decided to administer it to all students because they felt they needed that mid-year information to really monitor every student's progress. Again, to see if there are students that are still in need of some additional support in math and reading, and maybe students who no longer need that support. And they didn't want to wait to the end of the year to find out if a particular group of students or a class were weak in a particular area, such as expressing fractions as decimals. Now at Central School last January, we administered the iReady to students who are receiving some additional support through our tiered intervention services. But as a result of that January testing, we made the decision that this year we want all of our students to take that mid-year assessment, again, to really track every student's progress in math and in reading. And I also included in the packet the approximate number of days per school year devoted to testing. And you can see there's some variation from grade level to grade level. With kindergarten, for example, it's only 25 minutes, the dibbles. If you take into account the 3 testing sessions, just 25 minutes the entire school year. For 1st grade, it's approximately 3/4 of a school day. 2nd grade, 1 school day. 3rd grade, 4th grade, about 2 1/4 days. 5th and 8th grade are a little longer as far as the number of days devoted to testing because of the science test. 2 3/4 days, and then 6th and 7th grade, about 2.5 days of testing. And I do want to share with you also that we do have that strategic planning goal of promoting skills that allow students to assume responsibility for their own learning and personal growth. So starting this fall, we do have a district goal that our K through 8th grade students will have opportunities to set personalized learning goals within the classroom using some of the assessment data if they choose. And then we're going to work with them on how they can track their progress throughout the school year. And again, to increase our communication with parents, we will post all of this information on our district website. Questions about any of the assessments or the amount of time, our calendar?
I have a question. I just wasn't clear. When you talked about the new bill, the passage, the waiver. Mm-hmm. So I'm not clear. Have we applied for a waiver?
I understand September 18th.
I mean, we, Hampstead?
The state.
The state.
This whole state has done
Whole
it.
state, and I think it has to be submitted by September 18th is the date I'm...
So it's all or nothing? Either the whole state accepts it, or is it still going to come down to different towns, and towns are going to decide if they want to be part of that or not? I don't know if you know.
Well, in the waiver, there will be that option of just one elementary grade level taking the statewide test, one middle school level, and one grade level at high school. And then those students not taking that statewide test would take a locally developed test or something like the iReady, a standardized test.
Okay, thanks.
So I guess it's pretty related, because if the federal government approves the waiver from the state of New Hampshire, then the 5th graders will get the test again this year? I mean, and I say again this year because they were 4th graders last year that had to take this test.
The waiver doesn't take into account the science test.
It doesn't,
The waiver is only for the statewide assessment in reading and math.
I see.
So the new science test will still take place. We, not quite sure yet whether it's going to be a pilot test or not, because the state of New Hampshire is developing this test with some other states.
Is it likely that it's going to be a computer-based test?
It will be a computer-based test of approximately 2 hours.
Which is different than what we've been doing.
Right.
Right, because in our former test, fourth grade always had a hands-on piece, an experiment. In eighth grade, that experiment was either hands-on or they had to do a lot of reading about an experiment.
Got another. So what do we, and granted, I understand what you're saying. I understand that this isn't settled yet. You're waiting for additional information. I guess, one of my questions is, how are we going to handle professional development, right? How are we going to introduce this into our staff in enough time to feel confident that they can administer the test? Like, how do we have a plan for?
Well, they
that
do know
piece?
now that New Hampshire has to apply for the waiver, and in
Right.
the meantime, we're anticipating that we have to.
But the test hasn't been selected yet, right?
There are 2 companies that submitted an RFP.
Right.
One of them, which is the current company, AIR.
Okay. So if it's the current company, then PD probably less of an issue.
Correct.
More of if it's the other company, and then again, then my question is relevant. Like, how do we make sure that our teachers are prepared to administer a test that they haven't seen yet?
We're gonna make sure that happens.
Okay.
At this point right now, we're hearing more and more that it's more likely that it will be the company that we're familiar with.
Okay.
That the test is gonna look similar, but not
Yeah.
quite the same. And it will be taking place the way that it's always taken place in the spring.
Okay.
And unless there's some response from the federal government about our waiver, chances are we're going to have to do this in the spring. So that's why we're preparing all our teachers just to go on board like we always have been and be ready to do a test.
I just remember with SBAC, right? We had like dedicated PD time to like how you log in, how you select, because there's the different options. If it was just a practice versus the real one, like making sure that by the time the test rolled around, that everybody was clear on how it would be executed. That's all.
And we will get information from the state as soon as they know if their waiver's been accepted. So we'll roll. We rolled with Smarter Balance, and that was a pretty tight timeline as well.
Right.
Well, that's what I was going to address, is that when we instituted Smarter Balance 3 years ago, we were training in February and March for that test. It was about the same timetable that we had, Mrs. Bucco and I did it together, and I remember we got everybody in and ready to go, and the kids were ready to go by that time. So it doesn't look too different than what it did 3 years ago.
So we'll be ready.
We'll be ready.
Could I also just clarify the chart here that says approximate number of days per school year devoted to testing? That's from a student's perspective, because the school devotes quite a few more days, as you know, in order to open up the window for all the students to test. But from a personal perspective, in terms of a student actually having to log on and take a test, these are the times that a second grader might be, 6 hours for the whole year in those 3 different spans. So we just wanted to make sure that you understood that this was really from a student's perspective in terms of what they have to do for testing for our district.
And so that, because again, you're talking about posting this information for parents to see, so that parents aren't confused. Not to confuse this, this is standardized testing as opposed to tests that the kids might get in their classes. Like 2 totally different things, but I don't want a parent to see that and think that testing is testing. We're only talking about standardized testing.
And that, I should insert that word. That would clarify.
We need to be specific about the student piece.
Right.
Yeah.
We'll add some information to that chart.
But I think, you had asked Doris to kind of give you an overview, and I think this is a great way to start. We're also planning on posting this information on the web so that parents can see it as well. But we wanted you to see the information first.
Any other questions for Doris? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Denola to present the Hampstead Middle School Action Plan.
Can I just preface this first by
Goals.
saying that, you know, both schools have an action plan. We've been doing this process for a couple of years now, and Dillard presented his last spring. They're usually about, his was a year, and Maria is a 2-year goal. But all of this work that we do moves our goals forward. So I just want to say thank you for, you know, the work you've done with this action plan, and I'm anxious to see what the results.
Me too. Thank you very much. For your ease, I have created a detailed report for you to peruse and ask questions of what you would like to ask of me. I also put where we are in the 2-year plan. We are starting year 2. And in blue, I put what pieces have been completed and which pieces are in progress. And on the last few pages that look like this, that has a complete action plan that you received last year. So I have a narrative that I'm just going to talk you through, goal 1, 2, 3, and 4. And if you have any questions throughout, please feel free to ask me. So goal number 1 is technology, digital citizenship, and creative communication. I'm very happy to share our ongoing progress of this 2-year action plan. We are beginning year 2 of this plan and are on goal to accomplishing all action steps by June 2018. With the implementation of the one-to-one computer initiative, we have placed modern learning tools in the hands of our students and staff, which helps our students be more successful, accessing multiple resources, progressive learning, and the ability to communicate in real time with their school community. Goal number 1 centers on digital citizenship and the creation of student e-portfolios and multimedia projects. We have made great strides in teaching students, staff, and parents about the safety and responsibility of the ever-changing digital world. In your first page, I put the amount of parent forums we have done throughout the year. We've had multiple professional development for our teachers and our students with regards to digital citizenship, how to be safe out there in that cyber world, and how to create the multi-stage projects for the e-portfolios, that students can demonstrate their knowledge in all the core areas as of now. Every core course has an example in the e-portfolios, and we are on stride to finish everything up by the end of 2018. Any questions on the technology?
I have a comment. Just to help the board.
Sure.
Their packet doesn't have the second page duplexed. It wasn't copied correctly. So I just want you to be aware what you present to the board. We'll have to get them the corrected copy tomorrow.
Okay.
But it doesn't have goal 2.
I actually brought more copies.
Yes.
Okay.
So I
Our
think these
original
are good.
copy that doesn't have the blue ink does have it, but the one with the blue ink does not.
Okay. So
I have the
just want
black
you
and
to-
white copies, which I do think
Yep.
are collated correctly. You want to pass
Why don't you
those.
pass them back?
Thank you.
Thank you for the cross
Thank
and
you.
balance.
Yes.
Thank you. Any questions about technology or where we're going as a school?
I already have.
No, I guess we're
All right.
good.
Thank you. Communication. Goal 2 is focused on increasing communication between administration and staff and communication between HMS staff and parents. As evidenced by our Education for the Future survey, parents responded positively and were very appreciative about the increase in communication from staff and administrators. We have worked extremely hard to create numerous opportunities to share student progress in a timely manner with parents. Additionally, this year we added another step to this goal by increasing communication between special educators, math and ELA teachers, and paraprofessionals. There is a strengthened focus on co-teaching in the classroom and the sharing of pedagogical practices that will increase student learning. Okay.
So
Jason, do you have a question?
on goal 2, Ron?
Goal
goal
2,
two.
communication.
Yeah, so here's something I'd like to suggest.
Surely.
and I think the other members of the board are, kind of aware of we have a challenge in the community, and that is that when we try to do events in the evening in particular, it's a real challenge to get parents to come to those events. And a lot of us are parents ourselves and have kids that are actively involved in a lot of after-school type activities, sports and music and whatever, other activities, dance and whatever else is going on. It's a real challenge, and we see it when we try to do our forums, and we see it with the Hawk Talk and other things like that. My suggestion is that we investigate with relatively, I think, little effort, recording the Hawk Talk, and Dr. Dancy either on Vimeo or YouTube, uploading it, or even if it's just an audio piece, then a podcast, so that parents can, when they have the time, they can catch up on some of that stuff, and just try to meet people where they're at. And it's just a lot easier if we try to do that versus, we don't always get the best turnout for some of these things, but I think the information is really important. So.
What I found, and I think you're right on the podcast, and that's something Ms. Stevenson and I have been speaking of things that are pertinent and relevant to what we're doing, right now at Hampstead, and giving some guidance to our parents in that kind of a way. That's a lovely idea. But I also find that with the Hawk Talks, and I had 4 Hawk Talks, and they weren't that well attended. And then I created all those forums that we had, the cyber safety, the mental health forum, and that when they had a focus, like the screenagers and the discussion, and when it was really a focused area of information, the parents did come out for it. So I think people don't have time to just hey, let's hang out and talk about anything that comes up. But I think we need to focus those opportunities for our parents, and they really did come out for those areas. But the podcast definitely is an option.
Just a moment. We are prepared now to do YouTube Live. I've got everything all set up. We're just waiting for an event to kick it off.
Excellent.
And those will go right up to our YouTube channels. There's a YouTube channel for both schools, and then one for the district as well. So we're ready to go anytime anybody's ready to do it.
Caitlin?
Thank you very much.
In reference to the YouTube, I think if we could get that information out a little bit more too. I don't know how many people are aware that the schools have a YouTube channel. Right. So maybe an announcement at some point would be.
Yeah, I think the first time we live stream a school concert, or maybe it's the musical or something like that, I think, there's plenty of people in the community that might want to take advantage of that. No? Licensing?
Something.
Is that a licensing issue?
Right.
Yes. Can't record them or anything.
No.
But that's good to know. We'll keep it alive here.
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
So,
Thank you. Our goal number 3, our STEAM goal, has been full steam ahead. I worked real hard on that pun.
Oh, okay,
it's-
that was good.
Full steam ahead.
listen, that's the title of the proposal I put in for the National School Boards Association. So
Did you steal it from
we are
Maria?
aligned, okay? We're all aligned on that.
Simpatico.
Okay.
We have been full steam ahead for the past 2 years with participation of area businesses and the University of New Hampshire graduate students who collaborated with our staff and students to increase our STEAM practices. During this time, all staff has been participating in problem-based learning through STEAM investigations, open-ended inquiry, and authentic real-world problems using the HMS STEAM design model. Students are archiving their work by providing evidence of their STEAM participation in their e-portfolios. Kicking it up to the next level is our school-wide STEAM challenge for 2017-2018 academic school year. There will be more news on this coming your way as it becomes more formalized, but our entire school staff is on board for this challenge, and it will prove to be quite an exciting event. We hope you all participate, but I can't tell you too much right now.
Okay. Any questions? Jason?
I have a little bit of a concern with some of the stuff that's in this.
Sure.
And if I just misunderstood the situation, please correct me, because that would put my mind at ease. But it is my understanding that we don't currently track which staff members go to which PD sessions, if we have a PD. Like, we don't have a master. So when we say all of our staff members are going to do STEAM PD at some point, and if I'm wrong, correct me. do we have a master list where we can say, like, yes, 72% have now completed a STEAM PD? So we
people
can
are-
track and report on?
Absolutely,
Okay,
and they
good.
are assigned.
That definitely puts my mind at ease.
When PD comes, it's not usually up to choose what you want to do. No, what are we doing that supports our school goals, and people are assigned to the PD.
Okay, so we do control that, and we can report out 90%
Absolutely.
of the staff have received this training. Okay.
Absolutely.
Good,
Yes.
excellent.
Number 4 is our English language arts. HMS students are writing across the curriculum and using our Hsdsb Middle School Common Writing rubric with fidelity. Teachers have been trained to evaluate student writing throughout the different curriculums. Teachers are collectively analyzing student anchor papers for consensus on the rubric scoring, which leads to consistent grading practices. The critical skill of writing in our modern technological world has increased dramatically in the past 10 years. Strong writing skills are crucial for countless careers and vocations, and our work in this area is essential to our students' success now and in the future. So every teacher is a teacher of writing at Hsdsb Middle School. We have a common writing rubric that all teachers use when they're doing a writing assessment. And also our English language arts teachers have a specific rubric that is much more sophisticated and much more specific in the art of writing at a much higher level. So we are writing and writing and writing.
Any comments or questions?
I am proud to say, though, with this, as being last year was my 3rd year, now my 4th year, creating this action plan was definitely a plan that was formulated with everyone. All stakeholders were involved. All teachers, our principal's leadership team, our curriculum coordinators. We looked at data. It wasn't anything but, what do our children need right now? What do we need to focus on? And this is by no way all that we work on. This is the core, but there are so many other pieces that we work on a daily basis. But I'm open to any questions if you have any.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, next. This comes before us every year. It's the, I'd like to remind you that the New Hampshire School Board Association requests school boards all across New Hampshire to provide input on resolutions to be presented at the New Hampshire Delegate Assembly in January 2018. The deadline for submitting a resolution is Friday, November 3rd, 2017. It's been my experience that we actually haven't done this on any regularity. Jason tells me we did it one year, but it was rejected. So we haven't done it. If anybody has something, though, that they would like to put forth, you have your packet here. Tells you exactly what to do, where it goes, what kind of things they consider. It shows you what resolutions, policies, and statements of belief have been passed in the past. School choice, education funding, healthcare funding, charter schools, statements about local control and school district autonomy, school safety, accountability, State Board of Education, federal legislation, even public pension system. If there's anything that you feel needs to be addressed or you'd like to put forth, we can do that. Keep in mind the deadline is November 3rd. Any questions or comments on that?
Doesn't it have to be presented as the board? Doesn't it have to be a board member
The
would
entire
present
board.
to our board, and then our
That's-
board would approve
The
it?
entire board has to be in agreement and present, not just one member.
Okay.
And there are already some, or if you look at the 2017 ones, I don't know, I can't remember if they recycle ones that that they pushed for, but maybe didn't get passed in the legislature. So I just can't remember if they bring those back into the next year's cycle automatically or not. Because there's some that are still perfectly valid, like supporting fully funding school building aid, full-day kindergarten is in there, and adequacy aid. So there's some that are definitely still very much valid.
Yeah, I don't
this
think
year.
they automatically get pushed forward, though.
Okay.
Yeah, for some reason, I'm under the impression that you have to propose new resolutions each year, since there's new members each year. And certainly, we can't propose them all, and there'll be other school boards that will be proposing as well, but I think definitely, yeah, something financial and also clarification in the electioneering law itself. Maybe even reviewing the transportation law or mandating food to children in schools.
Well, that's what I'm saying. We're bringing it forward. Each board member, if you want to work on something, to present to us, and then we can refine it if it's something we agree with that we want to put forward. But it has to start with an individual, and then it comes back to the full board. Okay?
Yeah.
Right. Next, Dr. Wilson. Going to kick us off on the budget process discussion for this year.
It's hard to believe it's that time of year, isn't it?
Yeah.
Here we
Here we go again.
In your packets, I've given you the draft of our revised schedule for this year for budget development. As you know, it starts right now, and teachers and administrators have been already working on some things other than just the start of school. They're looking at their budget 18 months out. What do they need? So it starts at the school level. I put some dates in here as based on what we did last year, and I just want to make sure that the board has an opportunity to talk about, do they want to continue with this process? We devote at least 5 board meetings with budget in there for us to talk about the proposed budget. We start on October 10th when there's a discussion where you give us kind of a high-level view of what you want to see in terms of the budget. We have on the 17th, we have a separate work session where the liaison representatives meet with the director or the principals and have a more detailed conversation around what does the budget look like so far, because we've done some work to that. And that is usually held in the middle school or around the big table as kind of a work session. October 24th, another board meeting where we present to you at the end of the October the school district or the school budgets from each department. We won't have the district budget ready for that point. And then we do an SAU review in November, which gives us a view of where the budget stands. And through conversations with Dr. Metzler, myself, and Jeff Dowd, we'll look at some of the costs and items and maybe cut or add depending upon what we see. Comes back to the board in November. By November 28th, we should finalize all the district numbers, and we wait for Pinkerton's final numbers. They usually give us an estimate in October, but they really don't, their trustees don't vote on their budget till early December. So we keep asking for it a little bit earlier, and sometimes they're able to do that and sometimes they can't. But we always put a placeholder in there for Pinkerton. So that's the process. I wanted you to see it and have a discussion on whether you want to continue with this process the way we have it here. And then in 2018, I've given you some tentative schedules. I think these are the dates that are going to follow us as soon as the legal calendar is completed. As you know, we start with March 13th as our voting day. That's the second deliberative session. The first deliberative session is when we present the budget to the public, and that's February 6th. And our budget hearing is actually going to be January 9th. So once we get that calendar checked with our attorneys, then we will make that public. So we're already doing some of our work at the schools, and just wanted you to kind of see and comment on how's it gone the last 3 years, for those of you that have been on the board, and if there's any change you'd like to see in this.
Well, I'll start. This is the third year that I've been involved in it, and I have to say the last 2 years, I think it's worked well. I don't see really any reason to change. I think the timeline works well. It's very comprehensive. It allows for a lot of input. It's very thorough. And I think it captures everything. It gives us time to see what the SAU has produced in the way of budget so that we can come back with revisions if need be. So I, for one, think that it works. Of course, I'm open to hear board members if you would like to see suggestions.
It works when there's no blizzards.
January.
I know you don't control the weather. I know none of us control the weather. That's all. I think the overall process, yeah, it definitely works like this.
Yeah, I think this has been a good process for us.
All right,
Good.
great.
I think we'll
Then
keep it.
we're well on our way, and we'll keep it according to this schedule, and if something has to change, we'll let you know.
Okay, good, thank you.
You're welcome.
Renovations Improvement Project update. Just like to report out that the committee has met and will be continuing to meet twice a month, the first and third Tuesday of every month. The last thing we'd had was a public forum. I think it was fairly well attended. There was good representation from different portions of the population in town. There were administrators, staff, board members, parents, grandparents, people without children. I have to say I would have liked to have seen more elected officials present. One selectman, Mr. Guthrie, was there and had some input. But overall, I think the public forum went well. The format that was laid out by the architects, breaking into 3 different groups with 3 different titles, worked well. At the end of 25 minutes, everyone came back and shared their ideas with the entire group. Since that time, the architects have put together, they've collected the data. It's not going public quite yet. There's some revisions on it. We're looking at it. But they collected it. They put it all in one place. It's a nice report. As soon as that is finalized and it's been approved by the committee, that will be made public. Hopefully it can go up on the school websites so that everyone can see it. The next step is for the architects to come up with some conceptual drawings, designs based on the input that they've received to date. Also, I just want to go back. Before the public forum took place, we also had meetings with administrators, staff, and teachers. So everyone has had input into this process to date. As I said, the next step will be conceptual designs. When they're ready, they'll be presented. A decision will be made, and we'll move forward from there. But for the immediate future, that's where we are now. I think it's a good process. I think having these architects and I think having Trident Building on board, looking out for our best interest, the interests of the school district, I think has just made a world of difference. And to have somebody behind the scenes with leadership skills moving forward on what the next step should be, I think is really to our advantage. So, any questions? No? Okay. Thank you. Next, Dr. Wilson, your goals.
Me again.
You again.
Thank you. As you know, we are pretty goal-oriented here in terms of what we do for the district. I work for both districts, Timberlane and Hampstead, but most of my work is here with the Hampstead team. And so what I try to do is have goals that connect with your school board goals, and also in conversations with Dr. Metzler, these goals kind of represent the work we do. We do a lot of different work, but when you have goals, you make sure that it focuses you to stay on target and to stay on task in terms of those outcomes. So some things end up being goals and others just the work we do. But I wanted to bring to your attention, trying to follow along with your goals, some of the things that I felt were important for me to do. This will be also presented at the SAU board in October, but I wanted you to have a chance to see it first. And around curriculum assessment, I do a lot of work with the team, plus Doris and I have monthly meetings where we kind of move the work. And we're going to be continuing to focus on the competency-based performance assessments to take us to that next level. Look at any curriculum or instructional needs that are needed by teachers to lead us into some of that professional development that Jason was talking about earlier. We're going to continue to work on the expectations of STEAM and the integration of lessons. So you may not see a goal about STEAM, but you're going to see us still focus on it as part of our curriculum. We're going to maintain, because that's my job, maintain the conversations at the monthly meetings that we have for our agenda items. And then also, between Doris and I, we're going to be leading a homework advisory committee, and that will get us to some of the conversations, Karen, that you had around what does homework mean in Hampstead and what are some of the things that we might have for recommendations for changes. So we'll be in touch with you about how that's going to happen. As far as instruction, one of the things that we really looked at this year is what's the system, what's the process that we can have the most influence over teachers in being able to talk about their instructional piece. And for us, we decided it was that professional learning time that they have together as a committee, where they come together, they're focused on looking at student work, they're focused on instruction. We want to take the conversations out about, who's going on what field trip, or who's doing what duty, or who's, collecting what lunch money. We want those conversations to be done in another context, but these professional learning communities are all around student work. So we're going to revamp and restructure some of the PLC time. And in my conversation with the teachers union, they're looking for this as a really good way for their teachers to have time to do the work they need to do. So they're supportive as well. So we're going to continue to look at data and also look at our professional learning community's time and make sure that it's structured the right way. In the same time, I know Doris talked earlier about setting some personal learning goals, and Maria is doing some of that work more at the middle school. We're going to play with that a little bit this year of what does that look like for kids. So to learn, how can we get kids more invested in understanding what it is they need to learn and what they're interested in learning. So you'll see some more information about personalized learning goals as we go along the year. Of course, I'm always going to be supporting the facilities improvements, the things that need to get done in terms of the renovation and improvement plan, supporting your goals moving forward in that plan, as well as some of the things that you talked about in your goals around the recycling and the energy efficiency. We haven't talked about that. You'll have an opportunity to do that in your next agenda item, but to support that work that's needed to get done. And then continue to emphasize safe and secure buildings, which we have been for the last couple of years. Communication is always on my list, trying to improve things, making sure that we deliver those positive messages out. We do more and more press releases, and we think about that as an administrative team on how to get the message to our parents. Continue to report out on how we're doing on the strategic plan. I think that's important. There's a lot of work that has to be done there, but all of these things integrate with it. Continue to be visible. I had a nice visit with most of the classrooms today at the elementary school, and I just happened to pop in certain classrooms, and I saw all the children of the school board members today. So, like, I know you, you know. So it was quite pleasant. Yeah, the kids were doing some really interesting stuff already, and it's only been a week of school. Budget, as you know, it's part of my job to help kind of drive the budget process here in Hampstead, and Jeff Dowd and I have been collaborating quite well. We've developed, you know, the budget process. He will continue to be as involved as Mr. Stokinger was, so that'll be good. And I continue to liaise with Pinkerton Academy and their sending school districts, and trying to get, you know, the needs that we have as a district. They will continue or come to the district board meeting anytime we would like them to. We just need to notify them. So those are my goals, and I wanted you to be aware. We're also putting together some district goals, 2-year goals for the district. Student proficiency, student responsibility for learning, which talks a little bit about personalized learning and goals, and a focus on student learning through the professional learning community restructuring that we're doing. So those are some district goals that we're going to be presenting as we finalize them.
What was the second one? First one was personalized learning.
Responsibility for learning, which was out of our strategic plan, which dovetails with our personalized learning. In order to take responsibility, and I saw some kids today who had some notebooks called STAR, and it was an acronym for their academic responsibility book. And that helps them bring things back and forth to school, the things that they need to take home, the things that they need to bring back to school, and it's, again, helping them be more responsible for some of their own learning. So I was quite intrigued with the conversation we had with some of the classroom about that today. So when I finalize that, I'll share that with you.
Okay.
Any questions?
Any questions or comments for Dr. Wilson? Jason?
Dr. Wilson, regarding the liaison with Pinkerton Academy, I would suggest that this year, you know, with Mr. Morse's announced departure from Pinkerton, it's going to be really important to be tied into Pinkerton as they progress through the selection process. I know last time around, you know, we asked for regular updates, and we had some difficulty with getting the updates as they progress through. Hopefully this time will be different, and, you know, perhaps we can engage some of the Hampstead trustees maybe to get more frequent updates as they progress through that progress, or that process.
And I think you have a different voice on the trustees now than we've had in the past. And it was very difficult to have input because we were a sending district. We could have input, but we could not sit at the table. We were given an opportunity to sit in an interview session, which I think was great, but we had no voice in that process. I'm not sure the trustees will give us a sense of voice in the selection process, but through your trustees from Hampstead, you could have some of those conversations with them as well. But yes, we will go through that process. Thank you.
Quick question regarding Pinkerton. Do we have any information about a student representative from Pinkerton yet?
Not yet. We usually don't get them to start until the beginning of October.
Okay.
They have to go through an election process, usually at the school.
Oh, all right.
So, but we will. Yeah, we miss the student representative. But thank you for asking.
Jason?
Dr. Wilson, we have the enrollment numbers from our schools. Do you think by the next meeting we'll have the enrollment numbers from Pinkerton?
I have them in my report.
Oh, there you go.
Then we'll have them.
Fine. Yeah.
Yes, you will have them.
That answers my question.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Okay, I think we're ready to move on to our school board goals implementation. Dr. Wilson, will you lead us in the discussion, please?
Yes, you have a copy of your school goals in front of you that you crafted last spring. And it really helped us, I think, give us direction as a district of what we needed to focus on. I wanted to have you have an opportunity to talk about some of these things yourselves, specifically around, I think we have a way to handle the the curriculum and assessment focus on homework by having a homework advisory committee. The ones I was kind of wondering about was the recycling program, the composting, researching solar, that renewable energy piece. How would you like to handle that? Who's going to be the representative? And what are some things that perhaps we should focus on? So I wanted you to have an opportunity to kind of talk about that.
Being this is under facilities mainly, then it was kind of assumed that it would be on the facilities director's plate to initiate. It was part of the conversation around bringing Mr. Kufos on board. And, you know, what does he start, on Friday?
September 14th, I think. Thursday.
Thursday? So
I've heard two different dates, so
okay.
it might be as soon as Thursday, or it might be next week when a new payroll week
Right.
starts.
Right. So I feel like it would be a bit premature to really hash out any nitty-gritty details until we've really had an opportunity to maybe sit down and speak with him. Some of the green efforts I do believe can tie into the curriculum when it comes into science and really, you know, how we're handling lunchroom trash disposal and that sort of thing. But it you know, you join the children into the experience, we educate, and we make a cleaner school environment as a result. But I really think it would be kind of unfair to have this conversation without Mr. Kufos.
I think we can.
I think we can, I think we can still have a conversation,
Right.
and he can
Well,
jump in when
non-committal.
he comes. But one thing that I think is important is that Jim is the liaison to the facilities department. So I would like your input on this.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Thank you. And while you're thinking of that,
Right.
I'm going to go, excuse me for 1 minute. Nancy, you have the information on when Chris is actually starting?
I thought it was this Thursday.
We got an email this afternoon that suggested the following Thursday.
So I'll be able to report tomorrow, but not for sure. I thought it was this Thursday.
I thought he even told me himself. I think he thinks it's this Thursday. So,
I think I heard the 14th.
14th,
It should be Thursday.
yeah.
There's many of us in this room who think it's Thursday.
Which Thursday is the question?
I would,
The 14th.
I would
I
imagine
did
that-
not get this recent email, so that's why I said we'll find out which one.
yeah.
And let you know, but sometimes it rests on, you can't start somebody in the middle of a pay cycle, so we try to arrange that when the pay cycle starts. I know that that's been an issue in the past, so I will confirm that with you tomorrow with an
Okay.
email.
And that's why I want Jim to be a part of that, as long as you're, I think that was the understanding when we were doing
Right.
these goals, that you wanted to work
Yep.
with him.
Yep. It's interesting that the other night at the session at the Central School, there was, you know, even though these are things that we came up with last spring, the people giving input the other night, you know, spoke about learning opportunities for the children outside, whether it be solar or inside, about recycling. So the community had input that mirrored what we were talking about in the spring. So.
I think it's important, I mean, these are your board goals, so we want to make sure that we're in alignment. I mean, the administrative team can talk about doing some of these things, but I want to make sure that we are doing it in sync with what you all are thinking we should be doing. So that's why, if we want to have this conversation in another month, we can. In the meantime, you know, there are some things I know we can do at the schools in terms of, you know, reestablishing the recycling program that you were talking about. You know, it might mean a club at the middle school, for example, that, you know, we get some of the kids involved a little bit more than we have in the past. So those are some ideas that we want to brainstorm, but I just want to make sure that we have the opportunity to have someone from the board kind of help us with the direction where we're going.
Just a couple of things on here. I understand what you're saying, Kathleen, and I definitely, he needs to be a part of the discussion. I don't think there's anything wrong with having the discussion prior to him starting. I mean, Jim is our representative to the committee. As long as Jim takes the, gets a sense of what we want and brings that to the committee, I think it's going to get there. And plus, I imagine that before any of this gets done, he's going to talk to us and we'll have an opportunity to discuss it. I will say for my perspective, I look at, since we're talking mostly about the sort of the green initiatives, I think there's definitely an opportunity for cost savings, or at least some offsetting cost, by going to more energy efficient power sources, renewable energy. I think there's a science aspect, and that's one of the things I have talked about is my hope would be, if there's any way that, if we end up doing this, that we don't put all the solar panels necessarily on the roof, that maybe we reserve 1 or 2 to go on the grounds where the kids can interact with them, and we can use that to, further some lesson. I think that would be fantastic. But, again, it's very early in the stage, but I think that we're also at the stage where we can kind of talk about, wouldn't it be nice if some of this stuff could be done? And then we can investigate it and we can figure it out. I think that there's, there's potentially some lessons to be learned from our sister district. I know they did Cleaner, Greener Timberlane last year, and maybe there's some lessons to be learned from that. And that was a community engagement program that tied together with the schools. And I'm all for, if they have a program that they had success over there, like why can't we just steal it? Why can't we just take that and try to, if it fits for us, right? And obviously we'll have to evaluate it. But I think there's opportunities there. I think there's opportunities, as we talked about, for some of the clubs and to engage students. Mrs. Denola, it is pure coincidence. It's not like I talked to her about this. I'm aware of an effort underway at the middle school by a certain little girl who has the same last name as I have to do some of this stuff, and she has an appointment to see the principal, I hear, to discuss forming a club that would. She's already met with me. Oh, okay, see, there you go. And it was totally without my prompting. She's doing it on her own. So.
Perhaps she'd like to put recycling barrels outside at the middle school.
But I do think there's an opportunity to tie a lot of these efforts in together and look at them holistically, as opposed to individual efforts. So I think that's pretty consistent with things that we've talked about as a board before. So
I would agree, and I think my takeaway from all that you just said is I think that it's important that no matter what we do in every aspect, that we tie it to the students, that they feel some ownership, that they play a part in it, that they understand what's happening, so that it has value to them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
One thing I don't know how it would fit with this school, and again, just because we're just talking about these kinds of initiatives right now, is there's a fair amount of work underway. I know a couple of companies that are dealing with this right now in the early stages of dealing with food waste. And trying to affect food waste in the country. Food waste is, if you think about it, and it happens in our cafeterias, it happens in restaurants all the time, people throw away food, good food. I don't mean 3/4 eaten something. I mean a decent amount of good food. There's also food waste that occurs, again, in our cafeteria when things get beyond their expiration date, but maybe they're still good, but because of regulations, you can't serve, things like that. So I wouldn't mind seeing us at some point kind of tie, again, I think of these things holistically, potentially at least investigating some of those things and trying to tie some of those things in, or at least just understanding what we do right now, because I couldn't even tell you what we do right now. Do we, when food is at or near its limit, what happens to it, and there's a food pantry across the street, literally across the street from the central school. So, but I don't know, again, I certainly don't know the regulations that govern how we act with that thing. So
We would have to talk to Cafe Services, Fresh Picks, our vendor, definitely, if we're going to be involving some work that's going to be done around our kitchens, because right now it's very difficult to have any extra time devoted to something like this. So we're going to have to get some ideas and what their regulations are, and then try to figure out what our next steps are.
Okay. So for now, I think what I'd like to do is see, we need to form a committee. I don't want to hold that off forever. I think we can do that now. On the 21st. Okay. All of those who voted for the 21st, you won. The 14th, lost. It's the 21st. So we'll need at least one board member on this committee. Jim, is that,
Yep.
okay, that works for you? All right. And and Chris Kufas, naturally. Do you think we need more than one board member?
Do you think that we could get somebody from Hampstead's Recycling and Waste Management
From what?
Committee? Hampstead has a Recycling and Waste Management Committee. I think maybe we should reach out to that committee and see if we can perhaps get a volunteer from that committee, since they have some background information about larger scale initiatives.
I can reach out to them.
I'm thinking what we do is, let's have the committee figure out what they need, excuse me, and invite other people in as we identify that.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, to have control over this and see where we're going, and then take a look and see, is there somebody on another committee in town that could share their experience with us, rather than try to reinvent the wheel. So probably initially, though, it would be board and administration. Okay.
All right, we'll see where we are, and then, report out. Okay.
All right, that takes care of recycling and the green energy. The next one is homework. Right?
Well, the second part of the facility improvement is to, facilities improvements, to educate the public about the inadequacies and the need to secure funding for renovation and improvements of the facilities. Do we have any new plans to get that done? I feel like the public still needs to be educated.
I think that whatever would come out of that is coming out of the construction committee as a marketing piece for that. I
That's
don't
a good
think
point. There is the marketing piece in there.
we have a
Well,
marketing
we
piece
keep
for
calling it
that.
marketing, but it's not really marketing. It is education, and it is communication. Right? And marketing, people just think you're trying to sell them something. We're really trying to educate people, not sell them something.
Yeah, but I think the point is still there, in that there are communications that are going to be drafted as part of that effort. And that committee is going to be really close to
It's an
what's being
educational
done.
piece, but just, they're called marketing pieces. They're marketing pieces that provide education to the community. But we don't need to get into a battle over terms. But it is to educate.
Yeah, some of those conversations have started.
They've started,
Within
and
the
there will be
construction.
printed materials coming out. I don't think this board needs to have another committee to do that.
Okay.
Okay? So the next thing on the agenda here was the Homework Advisory Committee, and how we want to handle that. Again, a
Who wants
board,
to be the representative, because we'll have some teachers on it, we'll have some administrators, maybe a parent.
and at least
or
one
two.
board member?
Yep.
I can.
It is a board goal, we need to have a board member.
I can volunteer for that one.
That's
Okay.
fine. Thank you. And I would like to definitely have a timeline for these, especially the Homework Advisory Committee. I don't want this something to start, and in March, we're still talking about it. I'm hoping that the committee will meet, they'll make some determination on where we're going, and then take a look at our policies to address our homework situation here in town. So I'd like a timeline attached to that committee.
Committee needs to meet in order to have a conversation about that. So, but that will be one of the first things that they look at, what's the charge that we're giving them to make a recommendation for our practice and our policies. So that's what I think, is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, and I'd like to see it by, no, it's mid-year, by December.
That'll be tough, because we are in budget season, but it's...
I know, but we have a very active board. We can do this. Well, and what we're looking for, I think we talked about this, we want quantitative data. We ask that people submit quantitative data. We don't need qualitative, not like I feel my child, doesn't like homework, or I feel my child does like homework. This isn't a feely touchy thing. There's actually evidence-based data out there that this committee needs to look at as to whether or not, and then decide whether or not homework is benefiting children and at what age levels. I mean, the information's out there. We just need to pull the committee together and gather the information and make a recommendation to the board.
Yeah, and I think as you say, there's some quantitative, but I do think there's really good qualitative data that's out there. Not necessarily polling our constituencies, but there is good qualitative data out there, and so that we can research that as well. You got to look at it both. And, I think in terms of trying to come up with recommendations, it's not just the question of is it benefiting, it's also the question is to what end are we using, why are we doing homework, to what end? So, and there's a lot of answers to that question based on other people's perceptions. So we have to look at what parents are believing, what we're looking at, what the data's telling us, and the recommendations coming through. So,
Well, I'm sorry, but I have to disagree with that at this point, because
well, that's why I bring it up, because this committee
yes.
needs to have the freedom and the flexibility to look at qualitative data, because not everything is quantitative. So that's why I bring it up, that yes, they will look at the research. Some of the research may be qualitative research that's been done on homework. So that's why I bring it up now.
And as far as...
I don't think that there should be such importance placed on qualitative stuff as there is on evidence-based data.
And that's what I hear, yep. I
So.
understand that.
And it could be argued that psychological effects are qualitative data. So it's worth at least a look. And yes, we'll know when we're reviewing quantitative data versus qualitative data. And that way we get the whole picture instead of half of it. I think it's better to do a wide open view, but I agree that it shouldn't take an extreme amount of time.
Okay. And you're on that committee, so.
Yes.
Good.
Dr. Wilson, you mentioned a parent on the committee?
I think it might be good to have a parent representing the community.
Right. I would recommend more than one, because back in the spring when we talked about the advantages and disadvantages of homework, I think based on where your kids came from, preschool, kindergarten, first grade versus fifth, middle school, it gave a different perspective.
So maybe one from the elementary, one from the middle. We could do that?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Any other
Be in
comments?
touch. Thank you.
Next, board comments and correspondence.
Can I please?
You'd like to start?
Please. I know, I never want to start. I actually want to start.
Okay, start.
I've had several conversations, parents reaching out to me over the transportation issues. I really don't have anything to say to them except for I'm sorry. This is day 9 of school. We've been on bus backup twice. We had hour late buses for several days. We had children, high school students, that would not want to be called children, left at high school with no bus. There was some communication issues there. I mean, I understand, yes, things can get off to a rocky start at the beginning of the year, especially with the transportation, but all I can say is I'm sorry, and that's not good enough. And it there is no excuse. I would much rather, I'm just going to throw this out there, I would much rather decrease the amount of money that we're paying in busing. Instead of busing every kid, offer free after-school programming and have them over there after school doing some sort of enrichment program rather than, sitting on the bus for the amount of times that they are. And I understand that they're not always loading the bus at dismissal. I don't think all the parents understand that. I do think the parents think that the buses are there at 3:25, and from 3:25 to whenever they get home, they're on the bus, and that's not always the case. I would much rather offer enrichment programs than to keep supporting transportation financially. That's where I'm at this point. So, that being said, we had a transportation committee. I know we just loaded up on committees, but I would welcome reforming or revisiting the transportation committee and trying to figure this out once and for all.
I'm just unclear on one thing. This is the first time I've heard this, having an enrichment program at the school, for what, the kids still have to get home.
Well,
You can't just have them sit in an enrichment, someone's going to come and get them, take them home, right?
somebody's going to come and get them eventually, yes, but...
So you still need a bus service.
Well, we need a bus service anyhow because it's the law. So if they live between 2 miles from where the school is to their driveway, we're required to transport them by bus in grades 1 through 8. That's the way that the law is written. They can't walk more than a mile to a bus stop, but for some reason the law is written so that they can walk 2 miles to school. Maybe what we do is, because we have so many parents that drive their children anyways, is maybe at the beginning of the school year, we send out paperwork, are you registering your child to ride on this bus? And they respond that way. That way we're not setting up bus stops for kids that aren't riding the bus. And then also, if we have after-school programs that are school-sponsored after-school programs at the school, that will alleviate the bus loads as well. And, if it's a matter of the parent can come pick them up, but they don't want to deal with the headache that is the car pickup line, then they have the option to let the kid sit there, socialize, learn, do an activity after school instead of sitting on the bus or standing out in the sun, surrounded by all of these adult stressors.
So then you're saying the parents would ultimately come and pick those kids up?
Eventually, yes, hopefully.
Why not? They're yours.
If not, I'll just start driving them all home myself. Please don't make me do that. It's just, at this point.
I understand your frustration. I've gotten calls, I've talked to parents about the bus situation. I think some of it, should it exist? No. Is it acceptable? No. Does it happen? Yes. Does it happen in every district? Yes. It's the beginning of school. It takes a while for everything to gel together. And I know what this board has done is we agreed last time that we were going to give it a month or two and have our transportation director, Sandy, come back at an October meeting to discuss where we are. And maybe at that time,
We'll have a lot
maybe at
more
that time
data.
you'll have a longer list, Kathleen, you can
Yes,
go
well,
over
that's,
with her.
that's what I'm looking at, because it's been 9 school days. We've had 2 bus backup days. We've had, for the first week of school, we had a middle school bus that was like not on time any day the first week of school. We do all of this work to make sure that our students are having a great educational experience in school. And as soon as we put them on the bus, I feel like all of that gets undone. We're stressing them out. I mean, we have elementary school students that don't have access to the bathroom for long periods of time, and they're on a bus with 40 stops, and it's... maybe we should move up an update on transportation to the 26th. Let's do it at our next meeting.
Which
I
should
don't
be
want to
our
let it
next
go to
meeting?
October.
I can do that.
We can do that.
We can do that. And, I mean, part of what we do this first week, because I know it is frustrating, I know it's frustrating for parents, and we are getting calls, that is part of what happens at the beginning of the school year. But I also know that we keep data, and we're able to know how well the buses are doing or how much they're off in terms of runs, in terms of time, in terms of how many kids on the bus. So that's what we've been doing, is trying to keep some of that information. We can bring that back to you on the 26th. I can't, and none of us can, I guess, see when there's going to be a bus backup or not. It happens, and we're dealing with a company that they have limited resources as well. We know that we have 2 neighboring school districts who had to push their whole start of school over for a week because they had no bus drivers. So this, yes, it's very disconcerting when it doesn't work. I think for the majority of kids, it works, but there have been some snags. There have been, today we had a student on the wrong bus, a 5-year-old on the wrong bus, and that caused quite some harried moments for a while. I don't know all of the details because I just got this information before this meeting, but we're going to investigate that and find out how this occurs.
But this is part of the problem, is because you have 5-year-olds that are being impacted. Those are the youngest students that we have on these buses. And I'm sure all summer long, their parents, what bus are you on? You're on this bus. What bus are you on? All summer long. And then, I think 3rd day of school was our first bus backup. Of course you're going to confuse this child. And yes, if there's another bus backup, of course this child is going to be confused. And I really feel like it's on us.
And some of that, we've got to do a better job of making sure the kids get on the right bus and at the right time. That we can own. But there are certain things that I think, and I know this is just board comments, but I'd be glad to put it on as an agenda item on the 26th. We can look at the data again and see where you might want to go in terms of any type of solution. I mean, the other thing is that we've got to put something different in place in our budget for something if we want to add more buses, if we want to look at another solution. We are going to be up for a contract.
We have an option to add more buses. We have 2 neighboring school districts that had to delay the start of school because they didn't have bus transportation.
That's right, but I'm saying as a budget discussion, we may have to have some of that for next year as we, go out, if we do look at options any differently. But
I think what the board needs to hear, because we're not experts in the bus transportation business, I think on the 26th it would be helpful. You could have Sandy here and anybody else from the SAU who wants to give the board some suggestions. What are our options? We need to know. Because I personally don't know. I don't know how much control do we have over this whole bus transportation. Is that an SAU issue? I'm asking. So I think it needs to be clearly explained to the board, and it'll be public so parents can hear it. Who's authorized to do what? Who's in charge of what? When something goes wrong, who do you go to and say you need to fix this? I think those questions need to be answered.
Yep. And Mr. Gary will be here as well because that is his department.
Okay.
So,
does that work for you, Kathleen? For now?
For now.
Okay.
Okay.
If you could please do that for the 26th, the board would appreciate it.
We can do that. Thank you.
Anything else?
Well, actually, yes. I went to Lunch Buddies, and there's a lot of 3rd graders who think that they really deserve 3 vacation periods this time around. And I have worked in the BZ room a couple of times as well, and I've seen lots of smiling faces, and I can tell you that the children, when I see them in school, they're all very happy and having a great time, and that this is why this whole bus situation just upsets me so much, is because their parents aren't getting to see that. That's all.
Jim?
Nope, just at the thing at the central school. I think it was a good process. Unfortunately, not a lot of people came, but the people that came had a lot of good input.
Yep.
Really happy about that. That's it.
For me, just construction committee meetings, the public forum, lunch buddies, That's it.
I was at the construction forum as well, and enjoyed it, interacting with folks, and thank you to the people who came out. Certainly their input is appreciated. It's my pleasure to inform the board that the proposal that I made to the National School Boards Association has been accepted. So we have been invited to present at the upcoming 2018 conference. So I'd ask that perhaps at the next meeting that we can just vote on authorization to make the arrangements, the funding, so the flight and the hotel and stuff like that. So that was one piece, or one thing. Another thing is there is some potential changes that are underway in terms of how schools are being assessed. The shift is going to put more emphasis on growth. Dr. Wilson, I think you're probably aware of this. Yep. It's going to put more emphasis on, the number that I heard was 60%.
That's correct.
Weighting on growth as opposed to overall scores. This is a particular concern to me in terms of this district, in that Hampstead is a high-performing district. We typically are at or near the very top of the state comparatively. As a result, the growth tends to slow. If you're, I mean, it's just,
You're already at the top, there's
right, it's harder
no place to go.
So I'm concerned in terms of how that will impact Hampstead in our district, assessment, as how that's going to be impacted by this. Now, obviously, it's a preferable situation because it means our test scores are at or near the top of the state, but it's something to be aware of. Also for board members, I'm not sure if you've seen it, you may not have because it just came out within the last week or so. But the governor is pushing now to push back the start of school in New Hampshire to after Labor Day. So nothing on that is set yet, but there is an effort underway. And obviously, we'd have to look at that when we set our calendars if that's going to be what's going to happen.
Can I just pipe in for a second? He came out today in some quote and said that he believes he has 95% support for this. It is my belief that you cannot cut 6 inches off of the top of a blanket and sew it onto the bottom. I will not buy it. It's not a longer blanket. And I am not in favor of going to an educational model where we're counting minutes for our students and then hours of learning and trimming minutes off of everything that we possibly can. I just don't think that's a positive learning environment. So I would just say, since Governor Sununu thinks he has 95% support, I think an email, at least to his office, would be a good idea.
I think we have, tourism is a big industry in the state, no doubt, and to the extent that this may help tourism, great. I think we have bigger issues in education, not the least of which is education funding. We've talked about building aid. We've talked about universal pre-K and full day K. I mean, there are so many bigger issues that we face as a local board, and I know the rest of the state faces. Funding the retirement system, yes. How about we deal with some of those issues?
Let's just send a big email.
So.
Yeah.
But that's, those are my updates.
Caitlin.
Not much different from everyone else. I attended the forum, the construction committee, planning. I do want to thank everybody who came to the forum. Although we didn't have a packed room, we did have about 60 to 65 people by some of our counts, which for some of our public meetings is actually pretty impressive, and really got some good ideas and some good input from the public, which is very crucial in this project. So.
Good. Thank you. Consent agenda.
Thank you. I too went to the forum and helped facilitate one of the groups, and I thought that it was very positive, it was very forward-thinking, and we got a lot of different ideas came out that evening. So I wanted to thank everyone for attending. I think it was a great event. Again, on Friday, I had gone to the statewide meeting and the commissioner was there talking about his ESSA waivers, which includes that 60/40% change in the assessment process. So we'll wait to see if it is actually accepted. The Pinkerton enrollments, right now, I did get their numbers, and we're hovering right at 440. As you know, it changes almost daily. But we have 439 students that are in the tuitioned piece of our budget. We actually budgeted for 445. So we're about 5 to 6 students in the good there. We also have 3 students who are what we call ungraded. They are tuitioned as part of special ed, and we had projected 4. So we still have some room to have some other students join us at Pinkerton should they move in. But those numbers fluctuates quite a bit, and the numbers that we hold fast with are the October 1 counts. So when the October 1 counts come, I will make sure that we share that with you. Next, at next meeting, we're having the welcome reception for all the new staff that have been hired. That includes the paraprofessionals and staff, teachers. So that'll be from 6:30 to 7. And we'll have it out here as just a welcome, a chance for you to get to meet and talk to a few of them. And we'll have some very light refreshments. But we have, I don't know, maybe about 15 people?
I think so, yeah.
About 15 people who should be in attendance. So don't forget, next time we meet, to come a little earlier, 6:30. Again, we're working on quite a few things. We had some, our H-team meetings, talking about the goals and moving some of the things forward. We're very excited about the opening of school and the enthusiasm that our teachers have. Stopping in at some of our new teachers' classrooms, some of the smiling faces, as you said, was great to see. You've already talked about the clarification for the ESSA plan as well. In your packet, I gave you a brief opening day report based on the numbers that we have for enrollees. And also Sandy put in there, again, this was, I think, 3 days after school started, so she put in her report around the transportation and some of the problems that we had at the very first couple of days. The other thing we just wanted to make sure that you knew when we're getting information out to our parents, the company that used to be known as the provider was bought by another company, DSS Busing, and they have changed the names of the labels on the buses to Durham. So some parents were a little concerned because they probably missed an email that went out this summer. And they weren't quite sure who was picking up their children. So we're going to make sure that that's clarified. But they are the buses that we have a contract with.
Are they the same drivers?
A lot of them are.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know particularly this subset of students sometimes get really attached to a particular driver. So.
Yes, I think a lot of them were, yes. Okay. So I just wanted to give you that information. As well, we're putting on the website probably tomorrow under the transportation tab in the district site, contact information for when parents, who they're supposed to contact, at what time. We did some information, communication with Pinkerton and got some information from them as well. So there'll be some information for parents about telephone numbers, names of people that they can contact when they have some issues or problems with transportation. Mm-hmm. When do they call the SAU? When do they call the bus company? So to clarify some of the problems that seem to have occurred. As well, I do understand that Joanne Friedman, who is the manager of our first student, is going to be going out for leave for a few months, that I understand. So they are looking to have another person come in to either replace her or to change their management structure so that Marie Hill, who has always been our person that we've called as well, will also be there. So we'll hear more about that, but that's another shift or change that we weren't aware was coming our way. And other than that, that's all I have to report.
Were you going to mention, you and I had spoken, you were going to mention classroom management styles?
I did. I have asked the administrators, and Karen and I have been talking about classroom management systems and what does it look like in Hampstead. And so the administrators are going to be talking to their teachers. We're going to get more information about how each teacher does kind of a classroom management system, because everybody does it a little differently, which is okay. I mean, that's all right that people have their own style of how to manage discipline or how to work with students and engage them. But we want to get a sense of what's going on in the classrooms, so they're going to be working with their teachers to get more information. We just want to make sure that everything is positive and that the message is positive for kids. And we also know that there are many apps that are being used by teachers out there, and we want to get a handle on what they may be. Sometimes, you know, especially if they're free, they kind of just start this process of using an app and we have no notion of it, or we get information from a parent that we don't even know there's an app being used. So we're trying to get a handle on that as well. But I'll be able to report out once we get that information from the teachers and from the schools, what exactly we're doing in terms of behavior management and each classroom's practices.
Okay.
So.
Because even though that was not a goal, it's been discussed. And I think it was the feeling of this board that we did not want to see any punitive measures in place. Discipline is learned behavior, it's not punishment. We didn't want to see children in any classroom being singled out by having their names written on the board, or being humiliated in front of their peers, or in any way stigmatized. If there's a problem with a child, that's an adult conversation. I think we all feel strongly that children are not to be singled out in class. So methods that do that, I think we would like to see disappear. There are other ways to deal with children, and if teachers have problems and need to find other ways to work with students, I would suggest, you know, there are people out there to give you more tools for your toolbox on how to work with children in ways that don't punish in the classroom. So that's how this came about, and that's why we're doing this. We don't think that this is anything that should be appropriate in the Hampstead schools.
And I think that we will find that, you know, 90% of what's reported back to us are those positive things that we've seen in the classroom, especially some of the things that I saw today in working with some of the kids. But we just need to get a sense of what's going on in each classroom so that we can have those conversations with the teachers. So
Yep.
thank you for that.
Thanks. Is there any other business to come before the board? No? Seeing none, thank everybody for tonight, and I would look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Thank you.
What time is it, Rose?